All right, so here we are in Final Cut Pro 10, and I'm going to walk you through the 3 basic steps of color grading your footage. And these are some shots that I took of my son and my Jeep in my yard, and this was shot on a Panasonic GH5 in V-Log, which is the flattest setting to preserve dynamic range. It's also probably the most difficult type of footage to grade because if you're not shooting at a very high bit rate, you're going to introduce a lot of artifacts and noise and banding on 8-bit footage as opposed to 10-bit footage, which this is recorded in. This is 10-bit 422 footage recorded at 150 megs per second, so this is very high quality V-Log footage. So you see how flat the image is, and we have nice fall off between the highlights and shadows, right? A lot of detail in here, but the image looks very muted. It looks very flat. So we need to do a primary exposure correction and that's step 1 in our grading process, to bring this footage to life, to make it look nicer. So I'm going to go over here into Final Cut and use our color wheels, and this is my primary grade. So I'm going to go ahead and just start getting my levels to look right. Now, if you look over here on the right-hand side, let me just reset that. If you look over here on the left-hand side, you'll see the waveform monitor, and the waveform monitor is like a vertical representation of the luminance and the saturation of the image. So you see a little bit of the color in there. That's the color that's on the red right here on his shirt. And the rest of this is a representation. This is called the trace. This is a representation of the exposure. And you see that it's kind of in the middle ground here. And if we're looking on the IRE scale of 0 to 100, which is where we want to keep our levels within using this type of footage, we want to expand this and give it like a nice S-curve of highlights and shadows. So we'll go ahead and increase the master, bring down the shadows. We don't want to crunch them. We just want to add some contrast and bring up our highlights just to boost the skin tones a little bit more in the midtones there. Not too much because it is bright and it was shot outside. I don't want to crunch my blacks as you see right here. We definitely don't want to do that, so we want to be real careful. This is just to get us close. Now, as a second part of part 1 here, we can go ahead and grab some color curves, and if you're familiar with photo editing, this will look very familiar to you. And we're just going to go ahead and fine-tune our S-curve. Just bring our shadows down a little bit more, bring our highlights up a touch, and then our midtones as well. Don't want to blow anything out. Don't want to make things look too harsh. We still want some of that fall off there. Now we got to add some saturation. We'll simply just go back into our color wheels and add a little bit of saturation. Give a little life back into the skin tones there, and let those colors pop just a little bit. All right, so that's not too bad. That's a nicely exposed image. I'd say the color is fairly spot on. And if I show you the before and after there, you see that was our original log footage, and now this is our graded footage with an S-curve. So that's only one part of the process. The second part of the process here is to go ahead and give it a look, give it a mood, give it a feel. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. We can do it manually. We can go ahead and add another instance of our color wheels. So if you're looking at this in a stacked version, here's our primary grade, which is contained in these 2 effect applications. And then our third one would be, this is part 1 of the secondary grade, and we're going to go ahead and start playing with color here. So this is a little bit more magenta than I'd like it to be, so I'm going to take my master color wheel and I want to drag that away from the red and move it more toward the green, maybe a little bit more toward the blue, just to get it natural to the eye. And then we can start playing around with some of these other colors, maybe warm it up a little bit, bring the highlights up a touch and warm it up, and then the midtones, and just give it a nice warm feel. There's also a temperature slider down here which will help you to kind of create the mood you're looking for. You can move it towards or away from green or magenta down here on the hue slider or tint slider, and that gives us a nice warm, kind of moody, feely, touchy-feely, family kind of feeling image. And I kind of like that. Now, if I show you the before and after here, this is the original footage, and now this is the graded footage, and you can see that that is a very stark difference from what we originally had out of the camera. Now, of course, it needs to render a little bit before it's going to play back in real time. This is really heavy 4K footage, but you sort of get the idea of what we're going for here. Now, conversely, here's a clip of a vehicle that's got a bright red paint job, and we really want that red to pop. So we're going to go ahead and start with our primary color grade, which we'll go ahead and grab our color wheels here. And again, looking over at the waveform monitor. Whoop, pardon me. I don't know what happened there. What is going on here? Why? I swear to God. How does it do this shit? Okay. So we can go ahead and grab our color wheels over here, and let's do the same thing we did before. Let's go ahead and just adjust our master levels. Let's go ahead and create a nice exposure, adjusting the highlights and the midtones and the shadows. And let's get a little bit of a curve on here to make the exposure look more along the lines of what we want. Now, you don't want to lift too much in those highlights because you lose a lot of the saturation, which we're trying not to do with this image. We want the image to look nice. We don't want to lose any of that saturation in the red. We can always adjust it later, but let's try to preserve with what we have. So let's get our waveform monitor nice and full and, with a nice blend between highlight and shadow. Still got a lot of detail in here. Let's go back and add in some of the saturation again. And you can see the red really pops, and it looks kind of nice. So that looks pretty good to me. I mean, I'm kind of happy with that. We could always adjust it a little bit further if we wanted to. But the next shot, you're going to see something a little interesting. So if I just went ahead and copied and pasted to this next shot, now you see the exposures don't really match. This is a lot darker. We've got some blue in the blacks here. I might want to get rid of that. So let's just go ahead and adjust using our primary. Again, we're just doing the primary grade here. Let's go ahead and lift. We'll do like a pivot lift and lift up the exposure here. Let's maybe bring the highlights up a little bit more and the midtones up a little bit more. As you see here, and that's pretty close. Let's make sure we get some saturation in there. Now, I would like to get rid of the blue tint that I've got in these blacks, so we can go ahead and grab a color curves, and we could actually add a new instance of color curves. It's almost like you're just stacking these effects on top of each other. And using our blue channel curve adjustment over here, we can go ahead and select using the eyedropper tool, and it's going to show us where that blue lives. If we can just do that. And this line represents sort of where that blue lives, and we can just pull that out, and you see that the blue now disappears, and we're really focused more on the red, which, if we wanted to as well, go ahead and grab the red using an eyedropper tool here and adjust the intensity of that. And there you go. And then switching back over to our initial color wheels, we can adjust the saturation and really make that red pop. So when you cut from shot to shot, well, it's a little bit more candy apple in the first shot, right? So let's go ahead and maybe adjust the hue. Go back into our color curves here. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's go in and create a new instance of our color wheels. And we're going to go ahead and use a mask, and we're going to create a color mask, and we're going to go ahead and grab the red and really just drag it. So we're selecting all of the red pixels in this image, and now we can go ahead and adjust that hue however we want it. So we want to get a little bit more candy apple red. There you go. And then if we adjust it side by side with the image before, yeah, I think the exposure needs to come down a little bit. And there you go. Right? So that's the idea of, getting the shots to match and getting your exposures around the same where you want them to live, removing tints that you don't want them to have. And then the third part of our color correction, let's go back to the shot of my son here, and that's going to be applying some sort of a, attention grade or attention grabbing grade. And we can do this in a couple of different ways. We can use vignettes. So as I detailed in the article, there's several things you can do to draw a viewer's eye to certain places. So if we just grab a vignette here, and we just adjust the blur amount and the darkening. You don't want to get too crazy here. We don't want this to look overly fake. But there you go. That's just one way you can draw a viewer's attention to something that you want them to see. And then the same thing here. If you wanted to really focus in on just the center part of this image, a vignette's a good way to do that. And we can just drag that right to where we want that eye to lead to when somebody watches the image. So that's pretty good. Okay. You can also use blurs. You can make things look miniature by using a simulated tilt shift effect. There's lots of different things you could do here. I do want to touch on LUTs really quick. So let me walk you through the idea of what, how we did, sort of the secondary grade here on the clips of my son. You could also accomplish this using a LUT. So if we wanted to really make this moody and make it look different, we could go ahead and grab, I have an adjustment layer over here, which allows me to use a custom LUT. And, LUTs are lookup tables, which you can purchase online. They're look packs. A lot of photographers and cinematographers sell these to kind of allow you to apply their signature looks to things. And just by applying this adjustment layer over this clip, I can now affect any of the clips underneath the adjustment layer, and I'm going to apply a custom LUT. And let's just try some of these out. These are just some looks that I have, some different LUTs. That's kind of cool. It's very vintagey looking. We can adjust the intensity of that. And that's another way that you can apply custom looks using LUTs. Now, I don't like to use LUTs as a primary color grade until you do your exposure corrections, but they are nice to apply by laying down on top of footage that you have color corrected and gotten your exposures to match from shot to shot. So if I go ahead and just extend this out, now it applies the look to all of these clips. And it doesn't really work much on the, I don't like really the way it looks on the Jeep, so I'll just go ahead and copy and paste, and we'll apply a different LUT over these clips here and just see what else we can get look-wise here. Yeah, this is sort of, there's a little bit more dark and moody kind of look, but you get the idea. So LUTs can be used in many different creative ways to get your footage to look a certain way, or if you're trying to emulate or match a look of something that you've seen in somebody else's work, and you want your footage to have a certain look or style to it. That LUTs are a good way to do that, and like I said, you can get them online. So I hope this kind of gives you a little inside look into the process of color grading. Here's me just working at it in Final Cut Pro 10. DaVinci Resolve is more of the color grading application, and it goes into a lot more depth and a lot more detail, and is probably, unarguably, a lot more powerful, you could say. So DaVinci Resolve, if you're serious about color grading, would be the program to learn. But I hope this was informative and gave you some insight as to how to make your footage look good. And like I do say in the article, try not to rely on log footage for everything. Log is meant for a specific purpose, and you have to be shooting at a very high quality of footage in order to make LUTs or make log footage look good. So I would recommend definitely sticking to a more baked-in preset and then grading that as a good starting place from which to work from. So for Shutter Mag, I'm Rob Adams. See you next time.